To hear the experts say it, you've got to be doing value-based pricing. I guess that's the go big or go home approach. But the truth is, more companies likely employ cost-based pricing than any other pricing approach. So what gives? Are the experts wrong? Welcome to Value and Pricing Secrets. My mission here is to help you improve your thinking about how to value and price your offerings. Let's dive more deeply now into cost-based pricing. What are its strengths and weaknesses? What are its shortcomings? If you're a cost-based pricer, what can you do to improve your business performance? Before we move on, let me respectfully ask for your support. My commitment is to bring you world-class value and pricing content on this channel. If you want more, I need you to like, comment, and subscribe. It's the only way YouTube can understand that you value this content and want more. Any discussion of pricing has to begin with profitability. The simple fact is that a focus on pricing can make a company a lot of money. And this simple table explains how. Let's take our status quo situation here on the left. In the typical American firm, if they sell a product or service for $100, the cost would be $90 and the profit would be $10. Now take a look at this. If they could capture just a 1% premium, that is, take their price from $100 to $101, the costs don't change. But look what happens to profits. They also go up by $1, but that's a 10% increase in profitability. Price is the single most powerful lever most firms have to improve profitability because of exactly this reason. Of course, the flip side is also true. If you discount your price by 1%, say your price goes from $100 to $99, your costs remain the same, so profit drops from 10 to 9, or a 10% decrease in profitability. This is why profits are so sensitive to price decisions. Now, the beauty is that it just isn't that much money very often in customer situations. If you're talking about a $50,000 sale, 1% is only $500. On a $5 million sale, 1% is $50,000. So let me ask you, whenever you've tried to improve anything by 1%, have you generally been successful? Of course. I challenge you to pick up one simple idea from this video that you can take back and implement. Beyond the 1%, what is realistically achievable? Well, I believe that a focus on better pricing can often translate into improvements of anywhere from 2% to 20% on the top line of the business, depending on the individual situation, of course. But that has enormous bottom line impact, as you can intuit from taking a look at this table. So let's move on. As you'll recall if you've seen the other videos in this series, the most common pricing models are cost-based, market-based, value-based, and outcome-based pricing. And each one of them is unique in its approach, rules for success, and information required. So let's dive more deeply into cost-based pricing to find out what's going on there. To evaluate cost-based pricing, we must be specific about the definition. Firms who practice cost-based pricing typically exhibit the following behaviors. It's a commonly used practice across many industries, and it works in many cases. The approach is to calculate your costs and add a margin on top. Here's an example. $85 in total cost, 15% target margin, $100 price. Very simple example. That's how cost-based pricing works. In this case, the necessary information is the total cost of the offering, including allocated overhead. Now, this may vary from firm to firm, but this is what I've typically seen. Then a target margin is set, with its achievement being defined as success. Finally, this approach is typically driven by finance, They own the information, that is the cost information, and very often this is with firms that have strong financial controllers or people, financial people who drive price decision making and keep a control on sales. In the face of it, cost-based pricing makes sense. Build a product or service, calculate your costs, set a price higher than that to hit a target profit margin. Now let's evaluate cost-based pricing to determine its puts and takes. To evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of alternative pricing models, we need a common framework. This is the Value Price Surfboard, and its name is courtesy of my friends at Salesforce, who handed me that moniker during a training session several years ago. This framework for understanding pricing models is adapted by work by Dr. Irv Gross, who in fact is the individual who introduced value-based pricing to DuPont Corporation. And he went on to found the Institute for Study of Business Markets at Penn State. ISBM is the leading business marketing think tank in the world. A link to ISBM is contained in the description below. Now let's walk through the framework. The first thing you'll see is that when we think about our price, it's the traditional way. The price minus our cost is the profit margin that we will have. Now, for any business that's in business for any length of time, the value that they deliver to their customers must be higher than the price, or customers wouldn't buy. So we know that value delivered is at some high point, and here it's at the top of the surfboard. Now, the difference between the cost a company pays for inputs and the value that gets delivered to customers is described as the economic value created by the firm. Now, of all the economic value a firm creates, some of that value gets lost. Ask any experienced salespeople and they'll tell you customers can keep track of 2, 3, 4, 5 things at most about an offering. Everything else goes out in the wash. So when we're thinking about what value gets delivered to customers, we have to recognize that there's going to be a lot of that value that customers will simply not acknowledge, and it disappears. Now, what's the difference between the price and our cost? Another way to think about that is that's the value that we capture. That is the reward that the firm gets for its innovation, for its bringing its products and services to market. And finally, there's the value distributed. And this is really a key concept that's not often talked about in pricing. That is, the difference between the acknowledged value by the customer and the price they're paying is the value distributed. That's the economic driving force that prompts them to pay. If the value acknowledged is less than the price, they won't buy. So the value distributed is a key concept, and the important point here that I want to leave you with is that price in this context is not an endpoint. It's a variable, a slider, if you will, that you adjust to balance the value captured with the value distributed. The higher your price, the less value distributed, and the lower the willingness to buy. The lower your price and the greater value distributed, the greater willingness to buy. Using the surfboard makes cost-based pricing's shortcomings glaringly obvious. Cost-based pricing completely ignores the market and customers. No consideration is given to customers' willingness to pay. And if you were a surfer, only half a surfboard would not get you very far. Historically, across many markets, research has shown that cost-based pricing is the least profitable approach to pricing. For example, value-based pricing can often yield margins 3 times as high as cost-based pricing. By ignoring customers, cost-based pricing may result in prices that are too high and costing lost sales, or prices may be too low, resulting in lost margins. Either way, cost-based pricing can seriously miss the market and profits suffer. Now, if you're finding this information valuable, please smash the like button and hit subscribe for more solid content. One more important point, cost-based pricing is not strategic in any sense of the word. In the 1960s, Kenichi Ome, head of the Japanese offices of McKinsey, defined business strategy as having three elements: a view to customers, a view to competitors, and a view of the company itself. Cost-based pricing fails on two of the three criteria. To say cost-based pricing is a strategic pricing approach is actually a contradiction in terms. But if totally ignoring the markets is so serious, then why do so many companies practice cost-based pricing? When it comes to understanding why cost-based pricing is so prominent, it pays to look at the typical environments where it's practiced. High volume products and services, right? If you're an O'Reilly's auto shop with 50,000 parts in your store, it's going to be cost-based pricing. In mature, stable markets, because as markets become mature, the cost-based and market-based prices tend to collapse around one another. So they're very similar, and cost-based pricing will work. When you're the low cost or low price leader like Walmart, Walmart can beat the hell out of their suppliers and then get their costs very low and do cost plus pricing and make it into a business model. When variable costs or associated risks are high, like lawyers or other kinds of professional services, when those people are on site, they need to be billed. So cost-based pricing is great because the biggest risk is having these people working and not being able to bill. And finally, in large sales, when a portion of the overall price is low, and you want the price to largely appear to be invisible. So for example, you can be selling network equipment for, say, $6 million. And by the way, there's $300,000 worth of sundries in there, and we're just going to pass that along to you at a 15% markup. Something like that is not unusual in large contracts. So those are the typical kinds of environments where cost-based pricing is practiced. So what are the key advantages and disadvantages of cost-based pricing? Well, on the advantage side, the list starts with that it's simple, stupid simple. Information is easily available from accounting and finance. In a half day, you can get all the information you need to set your prices. It manages the risks of high variable costs, which is why so many professional services firms put cost-based pricing to good use. And it's easy for finance to understand, to get behind, and to enforce. And if you're a pricer, a pricing decision maker, having finance as a supporter is really important to you. Regarding disadvantages, either your price could be too high or too low. Every single consultant I've ever met has at one time or another priced themselves too high because they counted the number of hours it would take rather than the value to the customer. Incentives are in conflict with your customer. Look at it this way. If you're a cost-based pricer as a consultant, you want to bill as many hours as you can. And from a customer standpoint, they want exactly the opposite. They want to pay you the least number of hours they can get away with. The incentives are absolutely opposed between you and your customer. It's difficult to capture the value of productivity improvements. For example, let's say you run a legal practice, you're quite successful, you invest in productivity software that can improve the productivity of your lawyers by 50%. That would be great. There's only one problem. Now your lawyers are billing 50% fewer hours and your revenues have dropped by 50% because you're using cost-based pricing. Number 4, it destroys the potential value of new offerings and may start a price war. Most price wars are started unintentionally and without any look at the market or competition. There's a good chance you could undervalue new offerings. And finally, it's hard for salespeople because price is really disconnected from the value. It's not unusual in cost-based pricing companies for salespeople to be grumbling about the cost of things. And finally, it puts finance in conflict with sales in a big way. And finance is even often referred to as the VP of no. Look, I'm not saying that you should ignore your costs in setting your prices, but understand that cost-based pricing inherently contains a lot of risk, and disadvantages outweigh advantages in many, many cases. If you find this content of value, please smash the like button and subscribe for more. So what about improving cost-based pricing performance? Well, here's some tips. The most immediate opportunity is to better manage discounting. To make up for its shortcomings, very often companies give sales great leeway to set list prices high and to give salespeople room to negotiate. Often this results in rampant discounting and lost margins. My second tip is to try segmenting customers with the goal of profitability. Most organizations do, at the end of the day, target a profit margin goal. But individual deals may be much higher than that target margin or much lower. And in one case recently that I worked on, a full 20% of the company's customers were unprofitable. That was across all of their purchases. Unprofitable, 20% of customers. The business was paying them to be their customers. So those customers, even in a cost-based pricing environment, can be targeted for improvement. My mission here is to develop your thinking about valuing and pricing your offerings. I invite you to join me for my mini seminar, The Hidden Power of Value and Pricing. During that seminar, we'll discuss the top pricing problems our clients have come to us to solve, more depth on alternative pricing models, and more detailed strategies for improvement, an introduction to the fundamentals of pricing strategy, proactive price management, and pricing effectiveness through sales. More examples in more depth from some of the world's leading corporations. And the 4 key questions to ask before any pricing decisions you make. Please click on the link in the description below for more information. Thank you. Let me summarize now on cost-based pricing. First, the reason it's used is that it's easy to implement and control. So it's very broadly used. It's also a favorite with professional services because their variable costs are high and the risks of not billing for time are also high. But with cost-based pricing, the disadvantages often outweigh the advantages. It is on average the lowest profit approach to pricing. So if your goal is profitability, there are some things you need to do to improve things. Cost-based pricing can be improved by incorporating certain elements of market-based or value-based pricing and by better managing discounting through sales.